the Levites. Well, the story of the Levites actually begins in Genesis chapter 29. So could we go there, please? Genesis 29. It begins with the birth of Levi to Leah. And of course, Leah was the first wife of Jacob and the older sister. And it's a bit important to know the background to the story of Levi's birth. We know that Jacob married two sisters, didn't he? One he married because he was tricked. There was a veil, didn't know. And one he married because he loved her, Rachel. And that's a recipe for disaster in any story. And particularly in this one, because Leah felt unloved by Jacob. And she was incredibly jealous of her sister Rachel and the love that Jacob had for her. Whereas Rachel felt unlovable because she was barren and was incredibly jealous of her sister Leah and the children Jacob had by her. So Leah craved to be loved like Rachel was, and Rachel craved to have children like Leah had. So it's pretty tense, isn't it? Pretty tense in this family. And there's a sense of this tension that comes out with the first three pregnancies of Leah, and particularly the naming of the children, something that seems to be left to the women to do back then. Each birth of her children accentuates the cravings that she had for Jacob's attention and love, and shows us the intense rivalry that existed between her and her sister. So have a look at verse 32 of Genesis 29. And Leah conceived and bare a son, and she called his name Reuben, for she said, surely Yahweh hath looked upon my affliction. Now, therefore, my husband will love me. So I'm one up, you see. I'm one up on my sister. Verse 33. And she conceived again and bare a son, and said, because Yahweh hath heard that I was hated, he hath given me this son also. And she called his name Simeon. I'm two up on my sister. And then in verse 34, and she conceived again and bare a son, and said, now this time will my husband be joined unto me, because I've borne him three sons. Therefore she called his name Levi. He's born three sons to Jacob. You can feel, I think, brothers and sisters, Leah's need for attention, can't you? And for those of you who have ever felt that need, you will know it's all consuming. That need for attention, it's eating Leah out. Now, surely this time Jacob will do something. Surely he has to take notice. But of course, he never does. I think this is telling us something about Leah. It's telling us about Leah that family connections were more of a priority to her than a connection with God. And she had to learn to transcend this rivalry, this competition, this natural lineage through her sons, to rise all above that, to form a relationship with God. Because at this stage in the story, her focus is on herself. Each son that came showed more and more of her own self-will rather than God's will. In fact, you might have noticed that God isn't even mentioned except to support her own self-will and determination to be loved. And yet, Jacob, of course, doesn't change, does he? So her fourth son sees Leah make a change. Verse 35. And she conceived again and bare a son, and she said, now will I praise Yahweh. Therefore she called his name Judah and left bearing. Previously, she had said, now this time Jacob will do something. And yet he never does. So now Leah will do something. What's she going to do? Well, she changes her priorities. That's what she does. She moves the focus of a relationship, which previously had been all about her husband. Okay, my husband. I was hated by inference by my husband. Now this time will my husband be joined to me. She changes that. Now it's all about her God. That's a pretty incredible, powerful lesson to learn, isn't it? brothers and sisters, to accept that the only relationship that really matters is the one that we have with God. All other relationships are to be assessed on the basis, do they help or do they hinder my relationship with God? And Leah's beginning to learn this lesson, isn't she? And she ultimately did learn this lesson. We know she learnt this lesson because where was she buried? She was buried in the cave of Machpelah next to her husband. It's a wonderful turnaround for Jacob as much as it is for Leah. But it's a hard lesson to learn, and it was going to be nigh impossible to teach that lesson to her children. They would have to learn that same lesson for themselves. And that includes Levi. It's a hard lesson to learn. It's a painful lesson. But learn it he did. And that's what we want to focus on in our first study. So, just to finish the background tapestry. After 4 children, Leah stops bearing. In chapter 30, verse 1 and 2, we find Rachel's envy brings out her determination. And of course, we know that she yells at Jacob, give me children. And then he yells back at her, am I God? And Rachel's got dagger eyes for Leah, hasn't she? And in desperation, coupled with immense jealousy, she gives her handmaid as a wife to Jacob. And the tension keeps going. And Leah, though she's made her priorities change in the naming of her 4th son, she's still caught up in this rivalry a bit, because in verse 9 of chapter 30, Leah seizes her opportunity and gives her handmaid as a wife to Jacob also. So can you picture this scene, brothers and sisters? 1 man, 4 wives, 12 sons, 1 daughter that we know of. What have you got? You've got rivalry, you've got competition, you've got henpecking, selfishness, envy. It's all in the mix, isn't it? This was home life for young Levi. And at the top of the tree, we know, was Reuben. Reuben, pathetic, weak, indecisive, unstable as water, Jacob was going to say. He shows no leadership qualities at all, does Reuben. So who does that leave? Well, we're going to learn, brothers and sisters, that the real leaders of all those boys were the next 2 in line, Simeon and Levi. And they're thick as thieves, those 2. They are the real movers and shakers of the family. But we're moving a little bit ahead. So, got the picture? This is family life for Levi. So the next incident where Levi is mentioned is in Genesis 34. So come to Genesis 34, if you will. I'm sure you all know this story. It's the story of Dinah, Jacob's youngest child, it would seem, and it would seem only named daughter by Leah. There may have been others, but this is the only named daughter, and she comes from Leah. And she wants a bit of girl company, as we know, and she gets all mixed up with a bit of boy trouble. Except that the boy just happens to be a prince of the local territory where Jacob was dwelling, a prince of Shechem. Now, while we might know the story, what we might not know is, why is it here? Why is it in the scriptures? Well, it's a story of relationships and connections and family ties. In actual fact, it's the story of 2 groups of people and 2 brothers. 2 groups of people and 2 brothers have their origin stories here in Genesis 34. Now, the 2 groups of people are these. One group is going to be the Levites who come out of Levi. They have their origin story here in Genesis 34. The other group of people, if you were to come to, I don't have the verse down, and I'm kicking myself. The other group of people in this story are called Hivites. If anyone, it's in verse 2. Genesis 34, verse 2. And when Shechem, the son of Hamor, the Hivite. Okay, so 2 groups of people. You've got Levites and Hivites. They have their origin story here, and they start as far apart as you can possibly be. But do you know what the other name for the Hivites is, brothers and sisters? What do they become? What's their name elsewhere in Scripture? They are also the Gibeonites. Okay, and we're going to see in our last study how these two groups of people which start so far apart actually end up so close together you can hardly tell the difference. But there are two brothers that start in this story as well, and they are Simeon and Levi. And they start so close together you can barely tell them apart, but they're going to get smashed apart and separated and brought and torn apart and broken up by the end of the story. So, two groups that start apart but end up together. Two brothers that start together and end up apart. So, remember Reuben? Okay, the hen-pecked firstborn? All right, weak and unstable. You couldn't count on Reuben. So Simeon and Levi assume the role of leadership. That's brothers number 2 and 3. And it's very obvious that they are in the driver's seat in this story in Genesis 34. And they connive a plan, don't they? A plan of revenge. But this plan meant abusing the covenant of circumcision. Now, what was the reasoning for this act of revenge? Well, verse 2, it says, "And when Shechem, the son of Hamor, the Hivite, prince of the country, saw her, he took her and lay with her and defiled her." So it's clear that Shechem had done the wrong thing. He had his way with Dinah and he defiles her. In verse 7 it says that the sons of Jacob came out of the field when they heard it, and the men were grieved. Well, you would be, wouldn't you? And they were very wroth, because he had wrought folly in Israel in lying with Jacob's daughter, which thing ought not to be done. Hadn't Shechem heard of proposing first, then marriage, before getting physical? And we would agree, wouldn't we, with their sentiment, with their anger. We would understand it. But note in verse 13. It says, "And the sons of Jacob answered Shechem and Hamor, his father, deceitfully, and said, because he had defiled Dinah, their sister." That's what this act of revenge is about, they're saying. Verse 27, it says the same. "The sons of Jacob came upon the slain and spoiled the city because they had defiled their sister." Verse 31, there's no humility, there's no apology. They just say to their father, "Should he deal with our sister as with an harlot?" In other words, our actions are justified. Now, what was really their issue, brothers and sisters? We've just read them. They're on the screen. You can see. But I'm going to suggest that there's two ways of reading those verses. There are two possibilities. Number one is that Dinah had been defiled. You could get quite riled up by that and perform this act of revenge because they've defiled our sister. But I'm going to suggest, brothers and sisters, that there's another possibility. The second possibility is that it's because Dinah was their sister, their natural sister. And they didn't like the thought of their natural sister being defiled. Dinah was their sister. You see, these boys didn't actually have any problem with humbling women. In fact, Simeon ends up marrying a Canaanitish woman, probably or possibly one of the women taken from this town. In Genesis 46, verse 10, the spoils of the sacking of Shechem. And we know what Judah's treatment of women is like in Genesis 38. He also marries a Canaanite, but it's clear in the story in Genesis 38 that he often had other bits on the side, a fact that Tamar knew well and uses it to her advantage. No, the real reason I'm going to suggest, brothers and sisters, is because it was their sister. You see, natural relationships were more important to Simeon and Levi than a relationship with God. Where have you heard that before? They'd got this from their mother. That's the same thing that Leah had to go through. And to demonstrate the truth of this, brothers and sisters, that it was about the natural lineage of their sister with Jacob, these two boys went and took one of the most sacred covenants of God and abused it, twisting it to their advantage without any recognition of its importance or meaning. So what was the real meaning of the covenant of circumcision? I know we say it's the cutting off of the flesh, that it represents the removing of the foreskin of our hearts. And that's all true and right. In Romans and Colossians, that comes out. But let's just pare it back to basics, brothers, and right back to the first time that it was given in Genesis 17. Because the timing of this covenant holds the key. I don't know if anyone's done some workings out of when the covenant was given, but I'm going to suggest that if you work all the timings out in the story of Abraham, you will discover that Abraham was told to be circumcised at pretty much the same time Isaac was conceived. So you think about that and the incredibleness of that. Because what is the prime focus of the covenant of circumcision? Well, it's actually about the fatherhood of God. That's what the significance of the covenant of circumcision is. Come back to Genesis 17. So Genesis 17, verse 2. And I will make my covenant between me and you. My covenant. In the story of the giving of the covenant, the phrase my covenant occurs 7 times. It's the covenant number. This is truly Yahweh's covenant. Well, what was the covenant? Look at verse 4. As for me, behold, my covenant is with thee. Thou shalt be a father of many nations. A father of many nations. Now, the Hebrew word for nations there, goyim, is generally used exclusively for Gentiles. So when it says, Abraham, you're going to be a father, it's not talking about being a natural father, you see. Abraham would say, well, I'm already a father. What are you talking about? Yes, but not like this, Abraham. Not through natural descent. I'm not talking about natural connections. I'm going to make you a father of a group of people out of all races, all nations. How? Well, I'm going to make you a father just like me, says God, because I'm a father. And I want you to be a father, a spiritual father of a family like you've never seen before. That's why this covenant is between me and you. Me and you. 5 times we're told it's between me and you. It's a covenant of grace. So how was Abraham to become a father of this family, of this people? Well, verse 10 says it was going to be through circumcision. This is my covenant which you shall keep between me and you, and thy seed after thee. Every man, child among you shall be circumcised. And ye shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin, and it shall be a token of the covenant between me and you. Now think about that, brothers and sisters. Abraham would cut off a piece of skin that actually defines a man's fatherhood. And the irony here, the miracle here, is that in the very cutting off of that, it incapacitates the man to be a father at that time. So Abraham would have to rely and trust in God's fatherhood, because God's fatherhood is never incapacitated. He will fulfill his promise of a seed. So Isaac becomes known as the child of promise, doesn't he? And he was conceived at the very months Abraham was incapacitated. Now, is that what circumcision is about? Have we got that right? Well, come over to Romans 4, brothers and sisters, and see what Paul says in Romans chapter 4. Is it about fatherhood? Is it about God being a father? So in Romans chapter 4, verse 11, we read this. And he, Abraham, received the sign of circumcision, a seal of the righteousness of the faith which he had yet being uncircumcised, that he might be the father of all them that believe. So it's not just father of his own race, the Jewish people, the Hebrews that would come naturally through. This would be the father of all that believe. That includes you. That includes me. Though they be not circumcised, that the righteousness might be imputed unto them also. So what sort of father would he be? We'll come down to verse 16, brothers and sisters. 16 and 17 says this. Therefore it is of faith that it might be by grace. Remember, me and you, 5 times. It might be by grace. To the end the promise might be sure to all the seed, not to that only which is of the law, but to that also which is of the faith of Abraham, who is the father of us all. So Paul is saying anybody that has faith, Abraham is your father. And then to prove that point, in verse 17, he quotes from Genesis 17. He says, as it is written, I have made you a father of many nations. And then it says this, before him whom he believed. It doesn't seem to make sense when you read it fast like that. Before him whom he believed. Even God. If you look in the margin, the phrase before him means literally like unto him. So here's Paul saying that Abraham would be a father like unto him, like unto God. So God and Abraham are presented as fathers, spiritual fathers, looking out for individuals to be part of this family. Individuals that were motivated by faith and grace. This is what the fatherhood of God means. And it was conceptualized in Genesis 17 with a covenant of circumcision. It's pretty powerful stuff. But here's Simeon and Levi saying, brothers and sisters, we're not really bothered about the fatherhood of God. We don't understand any of that. That's not our concern. Our concern is about the fatherhood of Jacob that flows by natural descent into our little sister and shares the same mother as us. That's what caused them to be so vengeful. So they took that sacred covenant that defines the very intimate relationship that one can have with God, and they used it in their malicious and cruel plan to seek revenge for their natural sister. This is who we're talking about. This is the man Levi, from whom the Levites are going to come. They had, these 2 boys, one focus only, that of natural relationships. It consumed them. It ate them out to the total exclusion of God. And in order to accomplish their evil goal, they gave a false message of hope. So come back to Genesis 34. And they gave this false message to try and hoodwink, and they did this successfully. They hoodwinked Shechem and his father Hamor. They said in verse 16, then we will give our daughters unto you, and we will take your daughters to us, and we will dwell with you, and we will become one people. The Hebrew word for one, the Hebrew word ikad, means to unite, to twine together. It's actually fairly similar in meaning to the name Levi. It's ironic, isn't it? And Shechem and Hamor, they believed what these boys were saying, and they took that message back to their own people in verse 22. Only herein will the men consent unto us for to dwell with us to be one people. They totally believed Simeon and Levi at their word. they concluded in verse 21 that this family are a peaceable lot. These men are peaceable with us, verse 21. Therefore let them dwell in the land and trade therein, for the land is large enough for all of us. And they took that message of peaceableness, not realizing that actually inside Simeon and Levi's hearts there was nothing but cruel, vindictive rage. And in this story, brothers and sisters, actually, Shechem was more honourable. Verse 19, and the young man deferred not to do this thing, because he had delight in Jacob's daughter, and he was more honourable than all the house of his father. In fact, he was more honourable than the family of Jacob. Why? Well, because he kept his promise. He knew the meaning of sacrifice. He prepared himself to accept it. He was predictable because he was dependable. Simeon and Levi did not know the first meaning of the word sacrifice. They took the coward's option. They took the soft option. They were sick cowards, brothers and sisters. In fact, in verse 30, Jacob says, "You've made me to stink. You're like a bad offering. Instead of that sweet-smelling savour, this one's got that odious, gut-wrenching stench about it. You know that smell that just makes you want to vomit? Jacob says that's what you stink like." Now, there's no hint in this story or a shred of self-sacrifice anywhere with these two boys, Simeon and Levi. Even the trade negotiations are shown to be selfish to the core. Have a look in verse 8 and 9 and verse 12. There's all this bartering that goes on. There's always a bit of give and take in negotiations, isn't there? All right, trade negotiations, bit of give and take. You know all about that. Well, it's nothing new. They've been trying to do it for years. And here, Simeon and Levi, in their pretense, talk about a little bit of give and take. Verse 8 and 9, the idea of give and take comes out. And Hamor communed with them, saying, "The soul of my son Shechem longeth for your daughter. I pray you, give her to me to wife, and make ye marriages with us, and give your daughters unto us, and take our daughters unto you." Give and take, give and take. And Simeon and Levi respond in kind in verse 16 and 17. They say the same thing. "Then we will give our daughters unto you," verse 16, "and we will take your daughters unto us." Verse 17, "But if you will not hearken unto us to be circumcised, then we will take our daughter and we'll be gone." And of course, in verse 21, we get the idea of giving and taking when Shechem and Hamor take the message back to their people. But what really happened, brothers and sisters? What actually took place? Have a look at verse 27. What did they take in the end? Verse 27, it says, "The sons of Jacob came upon the slain and spoiled the city because they had defiled their sister. They took their sheep, they took their oxen, they took their asses, they took that which was in the city, they took that which was in the field, they took all their wealth, they took their little ones, they took their wives, they took them captive, and they spoiled even all that was in the house." It was never about giving anything, was it? It was all take, take, take. That's our introduction to Levi in the story of the Levites. If we were to sum up what we've learnt about Simeon and in particular Levi from Genesis 34, we've discovered that their relationship with their sister was more important than their relationship with God, number one. We've learnt that they willingly abused the special covenant of circumcision, all about the fatherhood of God. But they weren't interested in that. They were just interested in the family connections with their father Jacob and their natural sister Dinah. They gave a false message of peace and of being joined together. They never intended to be joined together. They lacked any understanding of the meaning of sacrifice, didn't they? And they never intended to give, they only intended to take. That's our introduction to Levi. It's not a particularly nice one, is it? Well, let's leave Genesis 34 now, because years pass by, and the terrible things that happened to Joseph have occurred, and the amazing things that happened to Joseph have also occurred, and the family's been saved from all the famine, and now they're in Egypt. And we come to Genesis 49. So come to Genesis 49, brothers and sisters, and Jacob is on his deathbed. He's about to pass off the scene, and he gives his last words, his last thoughts and requests. Have a look what he says about Simeon and Levi. In fact, he lumps these two together. He doesn't do that with any of the other brothers. He's going to give these blessings, and he gives them individually, but when it comes to Simeon and Levi, he pulls them together. And it soon becomes very clear why he does this. Judah and Joseph, they get the biggest mentioned, and nothing but wonderful words are said about Judah and Joseph out of the lips of Jacob. Simeon and Levi get the next biggest, and nothing but contempt and disgust is expressed. It's actually a stinging rebuke from Jacob to these two boys. And it's obvious from the tenor of his words that Jacob has had no reason to change his assessment of either of these from what he said back in Genesis 34. Remember what he said? You've made me to stink. And he can't find one good thing to say about these rotten stinkers. And he's on his deathbed. What does he say? Well, have a look. It goes from verse 5 to verse 7, brothers and sisters. Simeon and Levi are brethren. Well, yes, they were. Thick as thieves, as we've said. Two brothers that were huddling together at every possible moment to try and manipulate and control the family. Simeon and Levi are brethren. Instruments of cruelty are in their habitations. So this word instruments, it basically means anything that is prepared. It could be a utensil, it could be a piece of clothing, it could be some tools, it could be some jewelry, or it could be weapons. And I'm going to suggest that in this context here, it is weapons. It's a fancy way of saying that these boys loved using swords. They have these instruments that they are using to create cruelty. You'll see in the margin, their swords are weapons of violence. That's how the translators have tried to give us a sense of what's going on here. Instruments of cruelty. Oh, my soul. The word habitation is our word there for Hebrew word makira. It means a sword from stabbing. So 3 other translations here, the AV margin and Gesenius and RSV, talk about them as being weapons in this context here, rather than pieces of jewelry or utensils. He's remembering back in Genesis 34, isn't he? And the cruelty that these boys used on that occasion. Oh, my soul, he says in verse 6. This is the deepest sigh from this old man. He's full of despair for these two boys. Come not thou into their secret, unto their assembly mine honour be not thou united. So the word assembly here, brothers and sisters, is the Hebrew word kahal. In the Septuagint version of the Old Testament, it uses the word ecclesia for kahal. The first occurrence in Scripture of this word is actually in the life of Jacob in Genesis 28. It's used 4 times in Genesis. All of them are in relationship to Jacob. Jacob, have you ever asked yourself, why are there only 3 patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob? Why doesn't it go on to Joseph? Why is there 3? Why couldn't there just be 2, Abraham and Isaac? I'm sure some of you have heard this, but if you haven't, this is really God displaying how he would manifest himself and fill the earth with his glory. This is God manifestation. Abraham is a representative of God. We've already seen that. He's a father like God. Abraham, in the story of Genesis 22, is God in the story. Isaac is Jesus Christ, taken up and put on that altar. The manifestation of the Father. Jacob is the ecclesia. Out of Jacob, Isaac said in Genesis 28, would come forth the ecclesia. And the word ecclesia is used 4 times, the first 4 times in Scripture, in the life of Jacob. Jacob represents you and me, brothers and sisters. There's no need for God manifestation to go on any further. That's the limit. God, his son Jesus Christ, and the ecclesia. And so Jacob is clearly associated with the ecclesia that God was developing. Well, here, there's a new ecclesia that's starting. Jacob is identifying that there's another ecclesia being established that's in opposition to the one that God is making. There's 2 ecclesias. Stay away from that one, says Jacob. Don't let your honor be ever linked with them. Why? Because in their anger they slew a man. Well, that's Shechem, isn't it? Clearly they slew more than one man, but Shechem becomes the representative of the whole lot that they killed back in Genesis 34. And in their self-will, they digged down a wall. They digged down a wall. It's a bit clumsy there. The translators have found this a little challenging because there's a word that has one small letter difference, and it's this word Shoah. It means an ox, actually, whereas Shua means a wall, and it's deciding which one it actually is, because remember, there's no vowels to identify a word, just the consonants, and so the translators have put the word wall there, whereas most translations actually suggest that it means an ox. Okay, so in their self-will, in their pleasure, in their delight, they digged down. The word dig there really means to pluck or to cut, particularly hamstrings on the back of the leg, the tendons. And so they cut the legs of the oxen, they hamstrung all the oxen. So they weren't just content to kill the men. So pent up with rage were they that they slashed the legs of all the oxen for fun. They were more consumed with revenge than they were with booty. Pretty awful indictment. This is Jacob on his deathbed. And of course, that's a prophecy that was going to happen to the Lord Jesus Christ when Simeon and Levi would get together on another occasion. And we'll probably be referring to that later on in our series. We'll leave that for now. Cursed be their anger, says Jacob, for it was fierce, and their wrath, for it was cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. And Jacob is telling us that he sees the need for these 2 boys to be separated. If they stay together, the rest of the tribes will be swallowed up. They need to be separated. They're too strong for the other 10 combined. Keep them apart. Well, that's actually what happened. Simeon ended up becoming the smallest tribe. Moses doesn't even mention them in his blessings in Deuteronomy 33. And they were given just a few cities within the tribe of Judah, completely surrounded by Judah. And Levi received no special inheritance, but they were given 48 cities which were scattered. So they were scattered. They were kept apart, you see. Now, would you say this is a blessing? This is the blessings of Jacob. Wonderful blessing. No, this was a cursing, wasn't it? These boys were cursed. What an indictment. What a legacy. What hope was there for either of these two boys? Well, more time passes. There's 250 years down there in Egypt. There's the 40 years wanderings. And Moses now is on his deathbed. He's not really ready to die, but he's been told by God that your time is up. You can't cross over into the promised land. So he's about to pass off the scene. And he gives his last words, his last blessings to the tribes. Well, what does he say about Simeon and Levi? Well, come to Deuteronomy 33. It's amazing, brothers and sisters. You think this is in the wrong place? This can't have happened. Because in Deuteronomy 33, the first thing to notice is that he has nothing to say about Simeon, because Simeon's not mentioned at all in these blessings. And the second thing to notice is that Levi is mentioned, but it's the most glowing endorsement that you could possibly get. And if you thought there was not one good thing that Jacob could say about Levi back in Genesis 49, when we come to Deuteronomy 33, we find that Moses can't find one bad thing to say about Levi. He can't find one bad thing. It's a wonderful blessing. It's a remarkable blessing. There must be some turnaround in this tribe. Moses is bearing out that there's been an amazing turnaround in this tribe. Because from Genesis 49, it seemed that no further blessing could ever be given to either the man or the tribe of Levi. But out of Simeon and Levi, it becomes clear one man does change. And he infuses that change into the tribe that bears his name. So, verse 8 to verse 11 is the blessing that Moses gives to Levi. And it's a remarkable blessing, brothers and sisters. Verse 8, and of Levi he said, let thy Thummim and thy Urim be with thy Holy One, whom thou didst prove at Massah, and with whom thou didst strive at the waters of Meribah. Now, this Meribah here, I'm going to suggest, is the Meribah I can't see the quote on there. The Meribah mentioned back in Exodus 17. Don't know why I haven't got it on there. Exodus 17. Not the Meribah that's in Kadesh, the one that was in Numbers 20, because that's always defined as Meribah Kadesh. Okay? So there are two Meribahs, and on that occasion in Exodus 17, I do have it here, verse 7. On that occasion back there, brothers and sisters, there was the problem of the waters of strife, you remember. And although it doesn't tell us back in Exodus 17, it would suggest that on that occasion, the tribe of Levi did stand forward. See this idea of Holy One? The idea of Holy One, I'm going to suggest, is referring to the tribe of Levi. Levi are called the Holy One. The word holy means separate, the separate one. This tribe has separated from the other tribes to serve. The rest of the tribes contend with the Levites at the waters of strife. And back in Exodus 17, you remember that the contention was about, is Yahweh among us or not? And while the other tribes were saying, no, Yahweh's not amongst us, we need to go back to Egypt, the tribe of Levi seemed to be standing forward and saying, yes, Yahweh is among us. I've got the Septuagint version up there, which I think just helps to maybe clarify who's being spoken about. You can come and talk to me about that afterwards. But if Exodus 17 is hinted at in verse 8, when we come to verse 9, we know definitely that this is Exodus 32. Exodus 32 is the incident of the golden calf. And we know Levi stepped forward on that occasion in Exodus 32 when Moses said, who is on Yahweh's side? And they came out and said, we are. Because in verse 9 it says, who said unto his father and to his mother, I have not seen him. Wow, that's a bit different, isn't it? Goodness me. Not interested in physical connections here, are they? I have not seen him. The RSV says, I regard them not. Natural lineage means nothing when following Yahweh. The fatherhood of God is more valuable than one's natural father. Can you hear here, brothers and sisters, a remarkable change? Neither did he acknowledge his brethren. The RSV says he disowned his brother. That includes Simeon. He disowned Simeon, the one close, passionate friend that he had. He once stuck close to him, thicker than a brother, but not anymore. Then it says, nor knew his own children. In Genesis 34, family pride was the most important thing. That deep blood connection between Levi and his sister Dinah was once valued far above a relationship with God. Well, that's all changed, brothers and sisters. It's quite astonishing. It's remarkable. For they have observed thy word and kept thy covenant. Nothing was more important to the Levites than honoring God's covenant. And here you can see a change from Genesis 34 when he abused God's covenant. This is an astonishing turnaround, brothers and sisters. This is the summary of Moses' blessings here. In verse 10, they shall teach Jacob thy judgments. They shall teach. Who would you want to be as a teacher? The Levi of Genesis 34? No way. But they've changed. Can they become the teachers? Moses pleads. They shall put incense before thee. They shall put incense before thee. Notice in the margin for incense, it means to smell at thy nose. They stunk back there in the nose. Now they're a sweet smelling savour. A remarkable change, brothers and sisters. Bless Yahweh his substance, accept the work of his hands, smite through the loins of them that rise against him and of them that hate him. Kill those who touch Levi. There was Levi killing others. Now God's saying, I will kill anyone that touches Levi. Do you need to change, brothers and sisters? Is there any changes that you need to make for a reformation like Levi here, brothers and sisters? So the summary of Levi, brothers and sisters, in Deuteronomy 34 is astonishing. So it begs the question, when did Levi's reform take place? Our time is pretty much gone. And so if you want to find out where I think that reformation takes place, because it's not told to us, it's hidden in the text, I do have a slide that you can come and ponder on later. But lessons for us, brothers and sisters, from our first study. Where would we place our relationship with God when comparing it to our relationship with your family and your friends? How do you compare the two? Are we prepared to change so our lives are in accordance with Yahweh's ways, regardless what others might think? Are we prepared to stand alone for our convictions, whatever the consequences? And what type of instruments occupy our lives? So just come to Malachi chapter 3, brothers and sisters. Because in Malachi chapter 3, it's talking about the Levites. It's talking about us. So what part of Malachi chapter 3, verse 16 to 18 have we seen this morning? Well, I think there's two. They that thought upon his name. If you have a name is something that creates a relationship with someone. When you say someone's name, you think of the person. It's a means of identifying a person by extending our feelings about that person. So to constantly think about Yahweh's name is to have a relationship with him. And then it says, I will spare them in verse 17, as a father spareth his only son. The true saints will acknowledge that they desire only God as their father, not family connections, not natural fathers, and so he will treat them as his only son. So brothers and sisters, let's take the change in Levi and let's see now how that becomes the means by which God teaches the nation all about himself.
Don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Drop a comment in the comment section and let us know what you thought. And make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. Please share it and spread the word. Thanks for watching and remember to come back soon.